Good morning all and welcome to this week's webinar. Our regular listeners will know that we don't like using the R word, but it'd be remiss of us because we are business advisors if we didn't talk to our clients about how to deal with the R word. And as we believe the right size in the market is going to happen, we think in the next series of webinars, we need to talk about what's actually happening in the marketplace. So we've got special guests on today. We've got special guests at the last webinar. So today we're going to be talking about, are your clients going to save you when recession hits? So let's test your client relationships. But let's talk about recession first and foremost so we get a true understanding of this. So according to the Office of National Statistics, in August 2022, public sector borrowing was at 11.8 billion, which was 2.6 billion less than they borrowed the year before. However, it's 6.5 billion more than they borrowed in August 2019 before COVID actually came. So it says the government is spending an awful lot of money helping us to get out of recession. Spending by overseas visitors hit 2.1 billion in May 2022, and that's 134 million more than was spent than the year before, but it's less than the 2.3 billion spent in May 2019. Half of the UK adults who pay energy bills said they are finding it somewhat difficult to afford them. Retail sales volume dropped by 1.6% in August 2022. That means my missus hadn't gone shopping. The country, though, was in a downward trend since the restrictions have been lifted. So think about that. The country's been a downward trend on retail sales since the restrictions have been lifting. Non-food sales volume dropped by 1.9% over that month. Our overall debit card spending decreased by 9%, with entertainment and retail purchasing falling before 14% respectively. So it sort of says that we're spending and being a little bit more wise with our money. But the British recovery from the pandemic has actually stalled in the last 3 months up to June, with the actually economy contracting by just 0.1%. Okay, which has given us a sort of weak outlook. Okay, exports fell by 8% in June, which was a reverse of the following 2 months, which had consecutive growth. So it's starting to see peak and troughs going all around. However, trade fell with the EU and the rest of the world as British goods exporters missed out on 20% rise in the global trade after the pandemic. So does it say that Brexit is having a bigger impact than we actually thought from there? But there is good news. The good news is house prices. The average house price in the UK was £2,992 in July 2022, which is 39k higher than before. And that's an increase of 15% over the year from July 2021 to July 2022. So it says that it's up. This week, though, let's get into this week. I'm joined by Joe Mcshane, who's the Chief Commercial Officer of HRC Recruitment up in Scotland. Joe has just been reciting how long he's been in recruitment. He started a similar time as Mr. Jacobs. So what does that say to us all? But this is his second stint at HRC. He's run his own agency in between, which kicked off in 2008. So he's used to building an agency during recession. So I'll be very interested to see what Joe says. We have the return of Annette Thorpe, the MD of G2 Legal. She obviously has been running and been with G2 Legal for 22 years. So she went through the 2000 recession and the 2008 recession. So we've got to think, what can we learn from Annette from that? Me, obviously, I was started in the early 90s, when unemployment, get this, unemployment in the early 90s was at 10.3%, compared to 3.8%. And it peaked after World War II in 1981 at 13%. And to put some context on the gloom and doom mongers among us, inflation in 1975 was at 24%. That's 24%. In 1980, it was at 17%, and our last high point was in the 1990, which was at 8%. We're now at 10. It dropped back in August to 9%. So think the only correlation between unemployment and high inflation was in the 1990s, 1990 and 1991 to be precise. So let's kick off with some questions. So Annette and Joe, thank you for joining us. So I think I want to sort of start off with, we don't like to talk about the recession works. The big question is, do you think one is coming? And how should businesses address this potentially? Let's go to Annette first.
Yeah, thanks, Howard, and good morning to everybody. Well, obviously, with the stats that you've given there, Howard, there's quite a lot of the mood of recession. I think that's probably fueled by the media as well, to a certain extent, talking down the economy and the doom-mongering that's all around us, obviously. I think recruitment companies really are a good barometer for the economy and show us what's happening in the market. And I have to say that despite all of the doom-mongering, we are incredibly busy, and I know that other recruitment companies are, and we as yet have seen no downturn in the market. I don't doubt that there's going to be some tightening, and I think we all need to be alive to that, because all of the sort of stats that you've given there do show that there are going to be issues. We've obviously got higher inflation, higher interest rates. The pound is at its lowest level for a very long time. We've got the energy crisis, although I hear the government have announced today that there is going to be a 6-month cap for businesses. So that's good news, but obviously the attention is in the detail with that. And of course, we've got other world events with Ukraine, Brexit, all of these things. So it's a long-winded way of me saying, Howard, I'm not convinced as yet that we're going into a full-blown economic recession, but I'm not naive enough to think that all of these things are going to have an impact on us as a business. And clearly we need to be ahead of the curve and make sure that we're being agile and prepared for it.
Joe, what's your thoughts, Joe?
Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Howard, and good morning, Annette. I think Annette covered that topic very comprehensively. The difficulty is the contrasting information that we have out there. Like Annette's business, if we were looking at our recruitment business at the moment, it's going great guns, and it's going across markets. We're in legal, we're in financial services, we've got a big FMCG business with the whiskey industry up here in Scotland. And every indicator would tell us, yeah, that's trucking along just fine. However, anybody that heard Putin's saber rattling this morning, anybody that looks at the actual effect on the UK of the cost of living crisis and the energy crisis, anyone that's been through a recession before feels all those too familiar, feelings of slowing down in the market. And yet, with unemployment at its lowest rate on record, or at least since the 1970s, or 1974 maybe, and vacancy levels at their highest in the UK, I think we need to just be very, very careful. We need to learn all those lessons that I'm sure each of our businesses learned going through COVID, and just be very careful where job levels are going. I think there will be recession. I think it will hit certain markets. If we look at what's happening with cost of living, what will the impact be in the hospitality sector in relation to that? Whereas legal seems to have a great knack of riding out whatever crisis happens to befall the country. So it's a confusing picture.
It is a confusing picture, and I think the comment that comes when we talk about recession is that, I think Annette sort of briefed on it there. The more you talk about recession, the more you think you're going into recession. And I think the comment is that it doesn't matter what the business cycle is, if it's in a boom or bust cycle, is there are always clients that are buying, and our job as recruiters is to find those clients. The fact that we potentially may go into recession, and the Bank of England is talking about, we potentially be in recession until the end of 2023, and then it should start to come out. So, from an economic cycle point of view, it's going to be a short, sharp shock recession. How deep it will go is a very different conversation, because obviously if you look at the correlations between inflation and employment, etc., there's only really back in the 90s when it was really sort of correlating, where at the moment unemployment was very low in the 70s, but inflation was really high. Again, unemployment was reasonably low in the end of the beginning of the 2000s, and again it was really low in 2008 when recession hit. So you've got to start to think that unemployment is going to be something that will help us pull us out of recession. But we've got to think is that there's less people to be employed in the UK because of Brexit, and therefore from a recruitment point of view we should be in more demand, or potentially in more demand in certain areas, but certain areas, as Joe said, will go into recession. So if we start to look at this, why your existing clients then, or why your existing client relationships so important when planning to recession-proof your business? Joe.
Having been through several recessions before, the key is that let's be honest, good recruitment people always survive recessions. It might not be the boom times, but your clients are central to that, and how close your relationship is with your clients will be borne out during recessionary times. Certainly from each of the times that I've been through it, it's the companies and the recruiters that aren't as skilled that tend to fall by the wayside, because they don't have the quality of the relationships. Who spends the money? The client. Well, if your relationship is with that client, there will be areas in every recession that do well, and therefore you have to keep very, very close to your clients, and the people with the strongest relationships will ride this out. We saw it in COVID. I mean, that was the biggest visceral shock to the recruitment industry that I've seen. You can't meet anybody. Well, our business is predicated on meeting people. So, the lessons that we learn from that, I think, are important to this time, and that has to be, the client is absolutely central to the operation.
Oh no, I'm interested in your thoughts, because you're from that, in that legal area. So talk about recession-proofing clients.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that Joe says there, and I think we need to sort of we need to bear in mind that, as Joe said, clients are key all of the time, and therefore it is critical that our relationships are solid and strengthened, whether we're in a good time or a bad time. I think if you're just looking at recruitment, the recruitment business purely in terms of how much money you can make out of a client, and just putting bums on seats, then potentially your business is not going to be sustainable, not just in a recessionary market, but also when times are good as well. And I think clients look to us, and this is clearly what we want to be showing to clients as well, that we want to be working in partnership with them. We've talked a lot, and I know you have, Howard, and the team, about becoming that sort of trusted advisor and partner with our clients, and I think that's absolutely critical, of course, when we're going through bad times. We also have to remember that during COVID, and this is very different to the situation that we've got now and previous economic recessions, COVID, we had no time to plan whatsoever. It happened and we pretty much had shut down overnight. And I think where we actually were able to sort of survive and come through that and still have a thriving business at the end of it was purely down to those client relationships. Clients might not have been recruiting at that time, but we were doing so much more than trying to fill roles that they didn't have. It was about sort of checking in with them, seeing how they were doing in terms of their strategies and plans for things like furlough and redundancies, and where they saw their businesses heading for the future. And lots of businesses used that time, as we did at G2, to just reassess and have a look at the business structures and how we were going to come out of that stronger. So, client relationships, as Joe has says, are absolutely critical in good times and bad.
So I think if you think about, we've been talking about client relationships for an awful long time, and COVID sort of brought home how weak and how tenuous our client relationships really were. And I think if those smart recruitment agencies through COVID start to really work heavily on their existing client relationships, and if you look at the stats, you've got a 60 to 70% chance of your existing clients buying from you, where it's between a 5 and 20% chance of opening a new client. So obviously the revenue stream of your new clients, your existing clients, is extremely important. And I use this acid test every time when I go into a client and say, right, a recruitment agency, and talk about their client relationships. And I ask a set number of questions. And the first question is always, do you know how much your client spends on recruitment? And usually I get the answer, no, I don't. So you're not close enough to your client to know whether or not you've got 100% of the wallet spend or 5% of the wallet spend. You've no idea what percentage it is. Then the next question is, what relationship have you got with the owner, the CEO, the MD of the business? And generally what you tend to find is that they've got a very weak relationship with the person who actually makes the true decisions. And then you go through the line, what relationship do you have with the recruitment line? What relationship do you have with the HR line, with the legal line, with the finance line? And what you tend to find is that people have got a very little understanding of what their relationship with their client is. If I said, who's your biggest competitor in that relationship, they can probably name one agency, but they've no idea how many agencies are filling those jobs, etc. So we've got to get really closer to our client. And Peter Rollinston has asked the question, what should we be doing to be more agile? To be more agile, you've got to understand your client. You can't be agile with your client unless you understand what your client is doing and what your client needs. Now, when recession comes, talking to the recruitment line is all well and good, but the people that are making the decisions are the people in the C-suite. And if you haven't got a relationship with that C-suite line, then you're never going to create an opportunity to grow with that business, even through recession. If you don't know what that business is doing, it might be flatlining, it might be downscaling, but it might be in a big growth area. You don't know, because there's always opportunity in recessions. So I think we talk about that existing client relationship and we plan for that client relationship, but we talk about those existing clients. Why should we also be looking at the lapse clients? Because we've got lots and lots of clients that we've dealt with that we've stopped dealing with for whatever reason. Why is it important to start going back to the lapse clients then? Annette?
Well, as we said, I think all clients are important, and we're always looking at different channels and avenues from which we can get additional revenue and additional business. And I think, sometimes you have lapsed clients that maybe only recruit sort of once or twice a year, but there's no reason why, when they are ready to recruit, that they shouldn't come to you, and they won't come to you unless obviously you've continued that relationship with them and been speaking to them. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that relationship is calling them on a regular basis, trying to find out if you can fill roles. They don't have any. But it is adding additional services. Maybe you're doing surveys, or you've got market intelligence or market knowledge that will be useful for them. So I think you can bring lapsed clients back up to, if you've got your sort of ABC clients, you can bring a C client to a B client and a B client to an A client. But that, it's hard work, and it does take time. But I think that all relationships need to be covered all of the time, and it's just making sure that internally we've got enough resources to be able to cover all of those clients. It's very easy to put all your eggs in one basket with a client that's hiring at the moment, but then other clients get left behind because they only hire once or twice a year, and yet they may be your best clients in terms of fees, paying your invoices and generating revenue.
Joe?
I understand why it happens. We're recruiters, and we deal with the here and now. And the here and now is all about how, at the moment, is all about how busy we are and how many jobs we've got on. And as Annette rightly says, we don't pause and look back. And I think, what we were talking about is, the relationships with C-suite and trusted advisor. your colleague Paul Jacobs Howard hammered this into me at an early age and continues to hammer it into me even now. And he is, of course, right. And the thing is that with Lapse clients, it's very easy for it to happen, but we have had a relationship with them. We do know about the recruitment trends, and if we do go about it cleverly, we can get that relationship back on track, with less, expenditure than perhaps chasing new clients. And so therefore, yes, existing, absolutely yes, Lapse. We have the information, so completely understandable why they get forgotten, but they can't. And particularly for those of us that have been through several recessions, it yet again underlines the value of the client relationship.
Yeah. And I think that's the bit that we're trying to get to, is that, existing clients are clients that are buying from you now. A lapsed client could be a client that stopped buying from you 3 months ago, but it could be a client that stopped buying from you 3 years ago. But you've had that relationship, and it's easier and more cost effective to resurrect that relationship than it is for the expenditure of opening new business. So, we've got to look down both those avenues to make sure that we are doing that. If we then look at clients and we look at
Howard, sorry, can I just interject there? Just one other point is, I'm sure within this audience, like us and my business, is that we work in a specialist area. We work in niche sectors. So therefore, there's a finite number of clients. So when we talk about going out there and trying to get new business, we can't, get new law firms, for example, out of thin air. So it's absolutely imperative that all of the relationships that we've got, whether they're lapsed or dormant or whatever you want to call them, we do try and reignite, because that's how we get new business. It's not new business in terms of new clients, it's getting more business from the clients that we've already got.
And I think that goes into your existing client relationships as well. And I remember point blankly sitting in an office in Leeds and having a consultant who was running a 20K a week order book. So a huge order book, but mainly out of one client, saying, yeah, anyone else can try going to that client because I've sewn it all up. There's nothing else in there. 18 months later, there's a girl sat next to him with a 21K a week order book out of exactly the same client, because he didn't understand that the clients have different pockets, and he wasn't, investigating every single pocket, because again, he was speaking to the recruitment line and not the powers that be. She was speaking to the powers that be and said, you're good in that section, what about this section as well? And just opened it up, and it was quite interesting to watch that. So look, if we talk about consultants, then I've often found that when recession starts to come, and I think Joe sort of mentioned it and sort of highlighted it, that certain consultants and certain businesses bury their heads when clients stop recruiting due to turn down. So how does a consultant plan to prevent this being a shock? Because we know it will happen at some point. Some clients will stop recruiting. So, Joe.
Well, I mean, we're living in changing times, and one thing that COVID, I think, taught our business was the need to engage with each of our clients as far as what their issues are, not necessarily what our issues are. And clients will go through difficulties and problems in the market to come that they don't yet know that they're going to face. If we're really going to be a trusted advisor, we need to have the closeness of relationship that will allow us to try and help them through those difficulties. And certainly what we found in COVID times was, bringing two companies together to talk through problems, for example, that was nothing necessarily to do with vacancies. Those companies remembered us, and when they needed help in our sphere, they came to us. It also opens up, consultancy opportunities. We can talk to them about, we've got experience of restructuring, we've got experience of downturns, we've got experience of many areas of business consultancy that, again, we can help them with, that isn't just straightforward recruitment. And I think the key is, with the consultants, we need to tell them what they're about to face. We need to talk to them about what's coming in their markets, and we need to help them, particularly the young ones. They haven't been through this. Our graduate population doesn't know this market, and quite understandably. So it's our responsibility to try and help them through that and give them some advice and ensure that they're not simply the type of recruiter that just is chasing vacancies and chasing fees. We need to be a little bit more rounded than that, and we need to be more business responsible in the community, in my view.
Annette?
Yeah, completely endorse everything that Joe has said there. I think what we have to do as certainly as business leaders is not shy away from difficult decisions. We know that there's a potential that this is going to happen, that you know, if we have 2 consecutive quarters of for negative growth, that indicates that we are in a recessionary period. So things will change. And as Joe quite rightly said, a lot of our audience, a lot of our consultants who have never been through a recession of this nature. COVID was very, very different because it wasn't in the main economic. The economics were an impact of it, but that wasn't the cause. So, you know, we do have to educate our consultants and give them the tools and equip them with the tools to be able to deal with this and know the kind of conversations that they should start to be having without, again, scaremongering our clients and our candidates, of course, talking about recession. But that comes down to sort of training and making sure that everybody knows what this could mean for them, both for them sort of, you know, financially and also from the perspective of, you know, getting rejections and how that's going to impact on them. So, you know, there's a lot to take into account, and without sort of scaremongering people, I think preparation is key. We weren't able to do it with COVID, but we can do it this time round.
I think preparation, that word is key, and it's understanding your client base. So I always say, yeah, even now every year, what I'd be doing is looking at the clients that are going to continue buying, the clients that will flatline, and the clients that will drop off. You know, who do you need to replace? How many do you need to replace? But I think the biggest thing that you need to work on consultants is the mindset of the consultant. And that comes from the ownership of the business. That if the ownership is talking recession and talking really loudly and talking constantly, then the consultants will start to build excuses that recession is going to happen, and therefore they will see recession. Where I always thought in recession, and we had this conversation before we came on air today, that, you know, my view was very simple. You're either a recruiter that can't find a client who's buying, or you're a recruiter that's burying your head in the sand. And if you're a recruiter that buries your head in your sand, you'll never find a client that's buying. So you want to be that recruiter that believes there are clients out there, because even in recession, there are clients out there. And I had my best years as a recruiter and as a manager during recession, because my view was simply, we've got to dig under every single rock, every single stone, every single pepper, every single grain of sand. There's a potential under there. Are we turning them over? And that's the mindset of the consultant, where you've got to work harder. So you are going to get more rejections. You are going to have to put more work in. And that's what some recruiters have never seen before. Because if you think about now, how many people are doing new business? And we've been saying for months and years, you need to carry on doing your business. Well, clients are just throwing jobs at us because there's so many jobs out there, but you're not creating a relationship with your client. You're just servicing their need. Create the relationship, because when it dries up, they're the clients you want them to come to you because you've got the best service. So
I think from a commercial aspect as well, Howard, you know, the important things, well, I mean, you should be doing it anyway within a business, but I think at these sort of times, it's even more critical is making sure that you've got your terms in place with clients, that they're absolutely watertight, and in particular, payment terms. If your debt term is extending because clients are taking longer to pay their invoices, that could cause you a problem down the road. So those conversations need to be done now, that you're not giving any other concessions to clients. You're not reducing fees or negotiating with rebates or installment payments or any of these things if they're not paying their bills on time. Because we're not here to finance a client's business.
Correct. So if we jump into the next question, because I think half of that you've answered there, is the next question is, recession, even when you've planned for it, normally happens really quickly, and it comes really quickly. I remember in 2008 just being walked into a room and told, right, the country's going into recession, this is why, and then what we were going to do about it. You know, but it comes really quickly. So why is meeting your clients critical beforehand, during, and when we start to exit recession?
Closeness of relationship, Howard. It's as straightforward as that. If we don't understand what our clients are going through in uncertain times, how are we going to be able to help them?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to when we talk about your existing clients and how well do you know them, and people sort of laugh, why do I need to know the legal department? Why do I need to know the finance department? Well, the legal department will deal with your terms and conditions. Your finance department will pay your bills. So if you haven't got a great relationship with your finance department, guess what? During recession, you might be at the bottom of that bill pile rather than being at the top where they see you as an added value to your business. So to me, going out and seeing your clients now is the most critical part of your business. And then during and an exiting recession, we should be doing the same. And that's what you were saying there in there, that during lockdown, those strong relationships with your clients. And again, one of the things I'd asked, a client was, how strong is your relationship? And they said, what do you mean? I said, okay, we went into a relationship at the end of March 2020. When was the first client that called you to see if you were okay? And 99% of my clients said, none of them called me to see if I was okay. So you haven't got a relationship with your clients. Have you called them to see whether they are okay? And that's when the conversation started to talk. It wasn't about recruitment. It was about how are they coping and how are they doing? So it became a more human touch. So when we talk about meeting clients and driving through recession, services and new services are your existing services and new services are really important. So why are these two things critical to you, your consultants and your clients? Why is introducing your current service in a stronger way and introducing new services critical when we hit recession? Joe?
In essence, we have to communicate to our clients what it is we do. Oftentimes, we don't inform clients of the range of our services. The whole cross-selling point. I appreciate Annette's in one given sphere, but across our businesses, we've analysed the fact that we might be doing very well in the HR department, but the manufacturing side of our business doesn't know that we help in manufacturing. So information is always useful in a difficult time, and informing people of what services we can provide. But I think the more important element of that question is, again, emphasizing the client issue. What services do the clients actually need? Is that what we are asking them? How should we be helping them? I think that's the key thing. And new services can come as a consequence of that. We need to be basing it on what the clients actually need, I would say.
And I think you're right there, Jake. It's what the clients actually need. Annette.
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, obviously for us, it's, with the finite sort of client base, we can certainly make more of the services that we provide. And it is that old recruitment adage, isn't it? In terms of, speaking to the client and asking them, how can we help you? Help us to help you. That's what we need. And that's gathering more information, offering more services, and just working in partnership with them.
And I think that, we look at the services that we offer at the moment, and it's very transactional. I think one of you said earlier, but it's about putting a bum on a seat. Mm. And that says to me, if we're talking about putting a bum on a seat, we haven't got a great relationship with the client. Putting the right person in the right seat means that you've got a better, stronger relationship with your client. So looking at the service that you're adding now, and as Joe was saying, looking at extra service that you could add, and what you're talking about there, Annette, about bringing extra services and extra data to the client that helps them to recover from recession is really important. And I think lots of smart recruitment agencies during lockdown learned that lesson really, really quickly, that you can add more services to a client that enables you to move forward. And I think one of the questions that's just come in now from an anonymous, and I wish people would stop putting anonymous because I can't say the word, is how do we best support our resources who are candidate focused only? The convo so far has been mainly around building client relationships and finding new business. But for those that don't have this part of their role, how do we keep them calm if they're constantly hearing recession, recession, recession? So the question is, why is it so vitally important not to forget the candidate at this time in recession?
Well, candidates are your reputation, and candidates talk to other candidates, and candidates talk to the clients. And it's all about, recession is surviving in straitened times, and our reputation is very, very important. And if we're not giving outstanding service to our candidates, they're going to talk to other people, and they get jobs, and they remember who's helped them. Howard, your point about how many people went back to the client and asked them how they were doing, that is equally as important when we consider candidate issues.
I think another stat, Jen, I can't remember where I've read this stat, and I keep trying to find it, and I can never quite find it again, but I read somewhere that 90% of every permanent person that's placed by a recruitment agency never goes back to that agency when they're stuck looking for the next job. Wow. Yeah. Ooh. Wow. What's your thoughts on that? Not forgetting about the candidates during this period, Annette.
Well, I mean, it's two sides of the same coin, really, isn't it? Because we just cannot do the role that we do if we didn't have the relationships with the clients and we didn't have our candidate database and our candidate pool. So, keeping in touch with your candidates, it has, and in answer to the anonymous question, with regards to the resources, their role is as important as dealing as consultants dealing with the clients, because we have to deliver product to the market, if I can put it that way. So we have to keep in touch with our candidates, and bearing in mind also that the candidates are your best source of knowledge about other clients and the market and who's hiring and the experiences that they have. So, I think even in the downturn, we need to be there for our candidates, because, we will come back up again. There's no doubt about it. And those relationships are enduring. And again, where we want to be there for candidates and help them and support them when perhaps they're going through tough times. They'll know the market's not stable. They may be unsure about whether they should take a role because they might lose their employment rights, or the sort of, last in, first out syndrome. And again, we're there to help them with that and advise them on those things. So, resources, just keep resourcing. It's absolutely critical.
I think the comment comes that, if we go back to the 90s, early 90s, 10.3% unemployment. So there was lots of candidates available. We go to today, 3.8% unemployment. So that means there's a massive reduction in the amount of candidates that are available compared to the jobs that are out there. And I can't see that changing dramatically over the next 6 months. Yes, the number of jobs might drop, but the number of candidates employed may potentially go up slightly, but not massively. And therefore, when you start to think about the effects of Brexit and the amount of people that were employable that have left the country compared to the number of people that are coming back into the country, we're still going to have a massive gap in that number. So therefore, our candidates, as we all discovered as we started to exit lockdown, become our primary objective. We are so candidate shy at the moment, and we've all learned that yes, the client pays our bill, but the catalyst to paying that bill is having the right candidate. So if you ignore your candidates and just chase jobs, you go back to that, find a job, then go find a candidate. But during recession, if you've got lots of high quality candidates who will move for the right job, when the client comes knocking and you can service that requirement and that need almost instantaneously, then clients will keep working with you. So your candidate base absolutely needs developing during recession, absolutely needs building during recession, because people are frightened to move, and therefore you've got to work harder to price your candidates out. Your product is not your services or what you provide to your client. Your product is what makes you money, and without that product you won't be making that much money. So we've got to really work hard to develop that product more, because that's the bit that in 2008 people forgot, in the early 20s they forgot, and when I came into the market in the 90s during recession, we weren't chasing candidates, we were chasing clients. And it was only when we started to realize that actually, if I took a candidate that's available to a client, they potentially might create a job. And hence we start to lose that market.
I think there are about sort of 3.1 million vacancies in the country at the moment, Howard. And I think obviously they're across all different sectors, but that need isn't going to disappear overnight, even if we head, quite quickly in a downward trajectory. Those roles still need filling, and candidates still want to move jobs for various reasons. There's always going to be a need. So relationships with candidates is as important as with clients.
We have seen a reduction in the number of jobs being advertised in the last couple of months, and that's through the REC stats. And I think there's a reason for that. I don't think there's a reduction of the number of jobs out there, but I think because the candidate market was so tight that clients were advertising for a permanent candidate and for a contractor or a temp at the same time. So the volume of jobs being advertised seemed to be huge, when I think some were probably being a bit doubled up. And what we're seeing is the reduction of that doubling up, because they're now saying, well, actually, no, I'll only have a perm or I'll only have a temp. We won't actually have both. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a change when we see that reduction in the number of jobs, but I don't think that means there's actually a full reduction in the number of jobs. I think it's just how we've been advertising those jobs. So here's the last question. I think this is a question that's sort of quite interesting. Consultants, when lockdown happens, and we've said this on many webinars, if you look after your consultants, they will look after your clients, who will in turn look after you. So how do we build on that statement during a potential recession? How do we build on looking after our consultants?
Good consultants ride through recessions without too many difficulties. And I'm sure Annette's in the same position as we are, that our good people are getting headhunted left, right, and centre. We reviewed our employee value proposition during COVID times, increasing people's holidays, giving flexible working, to ensure, and it sounds like a cliche, but it's important. We have to be the employer of choice up here. We have to make the consultants feel that they're working for a company that really does care about them and their career. And without the consultants, we shrink. With good consultants, we grow. They are very, very, very crucial to our organization. And when you made that statement originally, Howard, it resonated at the time, and it's absolutely as true, heading into a recession. The key is good consultants will see it out. So it's as true today as it was when you originally said it.
Annette?
Yeah, absolutely agree with the statement and all that Joe has said. I mentioned earlier that I think it's really important and incumbent on the business leaders to be able to make sure that our consultants, whatever their experience, are equipped to deal with any downturn, as well as the good times, and that comes with regards to training. That's really important, and to learn from the other experienced consultants within the business. And Joe touched upon it there, values and culture. Your values and culture should not change whether you're in a recessionary period, a downturn, or upside. It's absolutely critical to any business that all employees are aware of what your values and cultures are, and everybody, it becomes part of your DNA. I say that phrase a lot here at G2. It's part of your DNA, and if you have a strong values and everybody abides by them, then there's no doubt that your consultants are going to, if you're seen to look after your consultants, and then the consultants will do a good job.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Employer of choice and live your values were the two comments that you both have come out with there. Mm-hmm. And I think that looking after your employees during recession, and they'll look after you, because what happens when you come out of recession if you've got rid of all your quality? And I remember in 2008 having a very interesting conversation with one of the very, very big wigs at Adecco, who came into beckon me to London, draw drew a line across a P&L and said, everyone else below that line, you need to get rid of right now. And I was listing several people up in our Edinburgh office, Joe, and several people around the country. They've been with the business 20 years. They've been in the business 15 years. They've been in the business 15 years. They've been with the business 10 years. They've been there, et cetera, et cetera. And yes, their market, the girls in Scotland were looking after some of the big banks, had just disappeared. But when the market comes back, they're the actual people I want in my business. So I'd rather manage them, look after them, train them, develop them, and nurture them during a recession period. So when we come out, we can come out quicker, faster, and more agile, as Peter's looking at. If we get rid of their quality, then when we come out, we're starting from afresh. And look at how many recruitment agencies in the UK, when lockdown came before furlough was introduced, suddenly shed huge amounts of their staff and then really struggled to actually start to get back. A, there was a bad feeling from everybody, but B, it meant that their clients weren't being serviced. So if you can't service your clients and your candidates because you've got rid of all your staff, when the market turns again, what are you going to do? You're going to get beaten by other competitors. So you have to look after the quality of staff, because they will always carry you through recession. And some other people, you may have to, bite the bullet and cover the cost, knowing full well that when it does return, they are going to be also at the forefront of that charge back into the marketplace. And I think it's important that we've got to understand that if you do look after your consultants, they will look after your candidates and clients, and they in turn will then look after you as the business owner. And that to me was the biggest question, or the biggest comment that we made at the start of lockdown: look after your consultants, because they will look after your clients. And I think that's where we should really end today. It's been a really interesting sort of conversation that we've started to sort of pull the cord of. And over the next couple of weeks, we're going to sort of really look at this heavily in the marketplace. So next week, we're going to look at, what does recession-proofing your business entail? And today was talking about what we should be doing, but there's things that we should be doing about recession-proofing your business so that you can grow rather than stand still during recession. So Annette and Joe, thank you much for your input. It's been absolutely amazing. It's been lovely to hear a different side, and it's so nice not to hear Mr. Jacobs and prattle on for an hour. No, it's really nice to hear a very different view from people that have been through it in different types of marketplaces and how those things work. Ladies and gents, I hope you've enjoyed this session too. Please come back next week. Again, we're going to sort of top this session, these sessions, or these discussions about recession off properly over the next 2 or 3 weeks, which we hope you enjoy. Once again, Annette, Joe, thank you very much, and we'll see you all again next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.